dames en heren, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tony Hughes.
Thank you.
Welcome, Tony. Well,
Thank you.
I'd say take off from here. Good luck.
Well, there we go. First of all, let me thank the SMA for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I have spent many hours in this room over the years listening to people give speeches in a foreign language. So I'd also like to thank the SMA for now giving me my chance to get my own back. So I'm sure you all understand English a lot better than I ever understood any Dutch. When the SMA told me that this speech, or at least this conference, was about the power of sales execution, I asked a few people what they thought it meant, and I got a lot of different answers, because it's a very broad title. So I thought that maybe one of the things I ought to do is to try and get a definition of sales execution, so that we all are coming from the same place. So the first definition I found was this one. The first definition of sales in the dictionary was the department of a company that organizes and does the selling of the company's services, so you people. And then I thought, well, I'll find execution. So the first definition I got of execution was the legal punishment of killing someone. Now, that really didn't seem like a very useful definition for this conference, but we do need to at least find some definition. It might be something that some of your buyers might think is a good idea. But actually, no, it doesn't work. But before I go on to any more definitions or looking at sales execution, I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you. Has anybody got one of these at home? A wife, a husband, a partner? Yeah? Or any of these? Okay? So can I assume then that with these people that you've got at home, you always get your own way? Okay? They always do what you ask them to do. Is that true? No, it's not. When your child wants an ice cream and you say, no, you can't have one, they say, but I want one. So you say, well, you can't have one because it's going to spoil your dinner. They say, I want one. You can't have one because you'll get it on your clothes. They say, I want one. They can't have one because you haven't got any money. They say, I've just seen you put some money in your pocket. So I know you've got some money. And what happens? They get an ice cream. Okay? They win. Not all the time. I'm sure you get your way sometimes. But even though everything that you've said to those children or wife or partner is logical, makes perfect sense, it doesn't make sense to them. Okay? Because logic, unfortunately, is not particularly persuasive. Because some people's logic is different to other people's logic. Also, being right is not persuasive. If it was, then every time you go and talk to your customers, I am sure they would be buying things from you. Every time. Because you're always right, aren't you? At least in your view, you're always right. Yeah. So being right and logic is not persuasive because people see things from a different point of view. You know, we all look at things in a different way. Just as an example of that, and you may have seen this before, but can everybody on here see a picture of an old woman? Put your hands up if you can see an old woman. A few. It's a bit hard from here. Can the other people who can't see a picture of an old woman, can you see a picture of a young woman? Okay. There's some people who are looking at lions or something on there at the minute, but yeah, you're either looking at a picture of a young woman or you're looking at a picture of an old woman. Can anybody see both? Okay, so some people can see both. Now, I suspect that if I said to you, the people in the room who sat next to somebody who couldn't see one or the other, to explain that picture that they can't see, for some people, they still would never be able to see it. Because we look at things differently to other people. We have a different lens, a different paradigm. We value things differently. And value is really in the eyes of the people that are going to have the value. They're in the eyes of the beholder. What I value, or what you value as a salesperson might not be the same things that your customers value. And sales today, more than ever, is is more of a commoditizing process. Has anybody in here got a product or service that they sell that nobody else has got and nobody else will ever have and nobody can provide the same type of solution? Has everybody got that? Good, because if you had, you're very lucky. You're extremely lucky. We live in a world of commoditization. We live in a world where lead times on products and services, be it software or manufacturing, is very short. We live in a world now where there's so much information available to the buyers around what the products and services are, or what your company does, even what you do to a certain extent on social media. Forums that tell people just how you treat your customers. Are you good? Are you bad? In some cases, people know more about products and services when they're buying them, unfortunately, than people who are selling them. So it's a difficult world for that. And if as a salesperson you're there to communicate value, you're there to tell people how valuable it is that what you've got, I think your days are numbered. Because if you're a talking website or a talking brochure, you're a very expensive resource for your companies that they probably don't need. And over the years, you can see how the skills of salespeople have had to go up, and some of the numbers of people in direct sales, not the people who are actually talking to customers, but in direct sales, have gone down. We've had to evolve as a profession and be much better at what we do. And what we do, those people who are good at sales, they create value for their customers by being in a sales process, by being in a sales call, where they're making people think differently. They're not trying to tell people what's valuable for them. They're not believing they're right. The customer has to make their mind up about that. They create the value. And if you could ever go to your customers after a sales meeting and say, would you have paid for that meeting? And the answer is yes, you've done a very good job. Because you've done something that has given them something during that process that they didn't have before. They're thinking differently. And the tool we've got to do that, the best tool we've got to create value, is communication. It's the way that we communicate with people. So some of you may have seen this statistic before. Okay? And what basically this is saying, that 7% of the way we communicate is in the words we say. The rest is either the way we say them or non-verbal behavior. Has anybody seen something like that before? Now, a lot of people may have done, yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you today it's wrong. It's categorically and absolutely a misquoted statistic. The reason I know it's a misquoted statistic is because the guy that did the research and wrote it says it is. This guy, Albert Mehrabian, who did the original research into what now people take away and use for their own, to value non-verbal behavior, to promote non-verbal behavior. When he did this research, it was about the way that people communicate their feelings and attitudes, not general communication. But people hijack it to say, it doesn't matter what you say, it's the way you say it, or it's the way you wave your arms around, or it's the other. Now, instinctively, of course, we know that's not true. Otherwise, I could stand up here for 20 minutes and just speak for one and wave my arms around for the other 19. We know that you've got to communicate things by the way we speak. And Albert got so fed up of people taking this statistic and running with it and doing their own things and misquoting it that in 2006 he made that statement. It's not about general communication. We all know that non-verbal behavior is very important. Okay? We know, particularly when it's about feelings and attitudes, it's important. You could go home this evening and see any of those partners or children that we looked at earlier and probably know when you walk through the door if they're in a good mood or a bad mood. Yeah? I can. You know, I can get home sometimes and find out that there's an atmosphere. I don't know what's created the atmosphere, but there's an atmosphere. If I want to know what somebody's been doing all day or what they want to do tomorrow or what they want for dinner, I've actually got to talk to them and ask them a question and listen to the answers and communicate with words. So, very important when we're looking at feelings and attitudes, but not quite so important when we're actually out there trying to persuade people. When I get challenged by this, and when we're doing consultancy for organizations, and they say it's about non-verbal behavior, I often give them an object and say, well, okay, you take this outside, I'm going to put a piece of tape over your mouth and I want you to sell it. and see what they do. Or you can have a choice of put your hands in your pockets and you can say as much as you want. Which one would you rather do? Okay, so verbal communications are very important. Now, some of you may, excuse me, some of you may recognize this gentleman here. His name is Neil Rackham. Neil's now a very respected conference speaker, consultant with many large organizations in the world, very much sought after. He was the original founder of my company at Huthwaite, and Huthwaite was founded because what he wanted to do was to find out what people were doing in interactions when they were successful. Not necessarily what are successful people doing, but you're all successful at some point when you do your interactions, sales calls, meetings, whatever they are. So what is it that you do differently when you're successful? And he derived excuse me, a behavioral analysis system to categorize what people say. Simple. Things like, are they asking questions? Are they giving information? Are they clarifying things? Are they summarizing? So, and there were lots and lots of different behaviors that he used to analyze lots of different scenarios. So he'd do things like, how do people manage meetings? At one time, they spent 2 weeks on a plane going to and from New York because the airline wanted to know how their stewardesses and their stewards actually spoke to passengers. And now if you do enough of that kind of stuff, you can build up a behavioral profile for a person. And if you watch enough people doing it in a job role, you can build up a behavioral profile for a role. And in fact, that's what happened with sales. Companies like IBM and Xerox thought to themselves, we can do this. We can find out whether or not what we've been teaching everybody for many, many years is the right thing to do. So at that time, sales methodologies that were being taught involved things like this. Tell them about your product and features. Tell the customer how it will help them. If you get any objections, that's very good. It's a buying signal. And ABC of selling, always be closing. Now, I'm hoping that those people who have in sales in here and never been through any training don't get that anymore. Because what happened was when we did that research with the likes of IBM and Xerox, who were very, very noted sales schools, you know, excellent reputation, they thought we were lunatics. Because what came back was things like this. When they were successful, people were actually talking less than the buyers were. They were asking more questions. There was no statistical difference between asking an open question and a closed question and success. There's, excuse me, there are no objections or less objections, and salespeople were only closing once. They'd done such a good job in the sales call, they didn't need any tricky multiple closing techniques to do what they wanted to do. And all this at the time was seen as being a little bit heretic. It was heresy. Well, nowadays, you know, every sales training methodology in the world will talk about these things, not about the other things. Just coming back to this definition of sales execution, this is probably a better definition. Okay, it's the act of performing something, especially in a planned way. Now, the words planning and salespeople don't always go together very well in a sentence. I know that we do plan, but we probably don't plan what we're actually going to do when we get in a sales call. We might plan what we want. We might even sometimes plan what questions we're going to ask. We'll have an account strategy that we've filled in on a form or on a CRM system. But do we actually plan what behaviors we're going to use when we get there? And it's possible that you can do that, but you do need to know what those behaviors are. You need to know when you've been successful, what have you done differently to when you were unsuccessful? Now, when we first started the research, we asked a lot of salespeople what they did when they were in sales calls. Then when we went and watched them, we found that they did something completely different. We asked buyers as well what salespeople did and why they'd bought from the salespeople. Almost to a man, the reason that they'd bought was not the reason why the salesman thought they'd bought it. Okay, because we have a perception gap about what we do. So by doing this kind of research, we can come out with actual behaviors that people use. So this is just a quick example, an easy example of one of the types of things we're talking about. We know, for example, now that in negotiations, there's a difference between what skilled people do and what average people do. So skilled people ask more questions. They get clarity by testing the understanding of things, by summarizing things back. Surprisingly, what they do is talk about their feelings. You know, people don't think negotiators do that. They do it quite a lot. They don't cry on the shoulder of the other person. They talk about their internal things in terms of, I'm pleased, I'm disappointed, I'm happy, I'm sad. And we're pretty sure they do it because whilst you're talking about your internal feelings, you're not talking about the content of the negotiation. You're not giving things away. And it's quite hard, unless you're the wife or children, to argue with the way you feel. You know, when you say you're pleased about something, it's not easy for the other side to come back and say, well, no, you're not. Okay, because it's about what's going on in here. They also do things like what we've got on their behavior labeling, which means they signpost what they're going to say. They'll say things like, please let me ask you a question. Can I just give you some information? They formalize the conversation with those things. Average people, on the other hand, tend to not do as much of that, and the skilled people avoid telling people they're going to argue. They avoid giving proposals back to somebody without considering the one that's just come from the other side. They don't irritate people by making statements like, this is a very fair and generous offer for you. They don't attack people. And they don't do what you might have done with the children when they want an ice cream, which is give lots of reasons against something or for something that can then be knocked down as soon as somebody finds a link in that chain. So we can find behaviors that you use when you're successful and that other people use when they're successful, even down to the point of giving them numbers. You know, we know that a skilled person will ask usually about 20% of their contribution will be asking questions, and so on and so on. We're not suggesting you should be able to plan to when you go into a negotiation or a sales call to hit those numbers. Okay, what we are saying is you need to have a consciousness. You need to be aware of the behaviors that you use with people because they have an impact. And whilst I'm sure you are aware of those things, to know that there are statistical models, and there's lots of reasoning behind it as well, it's not just the numbers, as to why you are successful at a certain time and why you're not successful at another time and why somebody else is successful. If you understand that information, if you've got that, you can change your behavior. It's very difficult to change your behavior. Okay, it's not easy. You probably need somebody to help you do it, but you need to know what you're doing first and be conscious of it. So, just to start to wrap up there, you know, what I think is that great sales execution is about being a great communicator. Okay, there are lots of other things. Okay, everything fits into the gambit of sales execution, from account planning to prospecting to proposal writing. They all need to be there. But I suspect the thing that differentiates you people from other people in terms of sales more than anything is the way that you communicate. And that's what differentiates your companies and products and services. So, just to leave you with maybe three thoughts, really. First of all, you wouldn't want to be in that situation then suddenly find out that you didn't speak the same language as the person that was trying to catch you. It's high risk. So when we talk about behavior change, you really need to know which behaviors. You know, what can you do differently, and what do you already do differently when you're successful? And be conscious of it. Can you then plan to use those behaviors as opposed to just looking for outcomes? And if you are going to try and change your behavior, do it in a low-risk situation. Don't walk into your biggest customer and think, well, Tony says I've got to ask 20% questions, so that's what I'll go and do. Okay? Think about how you're going to do it, plan to do it, know what you're going to do, and do it in a low-risk situation a little bit at a time. Try it at home. Next time the kids want an ice cream, have a different tactic, see if it works differently. Okay, I hope that's been informative, useful, and I really hope we can have a great afternoon. I'm sure we are, and a great evening. So I'll wrap up at that and say thank you very much.